It's easy to think that Nintendo really only has Zelda for its Switch launch, but there are other games out there, and the one that caught my eye was Super Bomberman R. Despite everything else, it was amazing to think that Konami was releasing a new Bomberman game with his original cute art style. Now, I don't have the longest history with the character. I only really played a few of his games on the Game Boy Color and Nintendo 64. But those are fond memories, and I was curious to just how well this launch title would capture that magic. Right off the bat, this is most certainly the Bomberman you remember. During multiplayer matches where you'll be spending the bulk of your time, each player is put in a different corner and must bomb their way to the others, gathering power-ups along the way. These can increase the size of your bomb blasts, the amount of bombs you can place, and even special abilities like kicking bombs or throwing them over obstacles. But there's a major difference between those who are familiar with the mechanics and the players just starting out. Still, it's hard to match the chaotic fun of Bomberman. Each stage has its own gimmick, ranging from moving platforms, to icy floors, to magnets pulling the bombs toward them. It's just enough to make them feel unique and force you to change up strategies and how you work your way toward taking out the other players. But even if you're knocked out early, there's an option to have a card on the outskirts where losing players can toss bombs at the ones still in the game. If they get a kill, they swap places with that player, although that person can now attempt to do the same. That is until the final minute of the match, when the stage begins filling with blocks, forcing the remaining players closer together. It's chaos at its finest, but there are options to get rid of some of those rules. Unfortunately, I was unable to play any local matches in Super Bomberman R, but the game does have an online mode. Here, players can compete in ranked matches to earn higher titles and coins for the shop, or simply have a fun match with friends or random people online. Up to 8 players are supported, though this only seems to be possible online if 2 people are playing from the same Switch in each case. The most I was ever able to obtain was a 5-person match. The online is not always reliable though, and really depends on each person's connection rather than a dedicated server. So I've encountered everything from matches that were completely smooth to others that slowed to an absolute standstill with button presses not even registering. Now, there are options to look for opponents with solid connections, but it is a shame that they couldn't nail this aspect. The multiplayer is what gives Bomberman its major replayability. But it's not just multiplayer in the game, as there's also a story mode to experience. And while the plot is as simple as can be, I still enjoyed it greatly. The 8 Bomberman brothers and their wildly different personalities were just silly fun. The game never takes itself seriously, and it's incredibly charming because of that. The art style used here is also a standout with its thick lines and exaggerated expressions. Just don't expect much in terms of actual motion. The campaign tasks you with making your way through 5 worlds with 8 stages each. While most of the missions are simply to take out all the enemies, there are a few that require something different. These can range from activating all the switches in a stage to rescuing hostages. They definitely mix up the gameplay, but they don't come around all that often. Each world also has a showdown with one of the dastardly bombers, and always comes down to a 2-stage fight. The first is a standard Bomberman match against them while they use their own special bombs. The second half is all about fighting them while they're piloting a giant mech. For the most part, I found the giant mech fights much easier than the standard bosses. They are devious with their bomb placement, and you almost always need to trap them in order to take them down. Sometimes you'll get lucky, but that's more of an exception than anything. The mech fights are all about hitting weak points to stun them, and then unleashing bombs to do actual damage. Most of them are fun, but the World 4 fight was a nightmare with wonky hitboxes and slippery ice limiting my movement options. And that was the surprising thing about Super Bomberman R's single player. It's tough. While there are only some challenging moments at the beginner difficulty, the veteran difficulty can be quite a step up. Not only do enemies move faster and smarter, but you have less lives and the cost to continue is a lot steeper. While it only costs 10 coins to continue in beginner, veteran jumps up to 300, while expert is a whopping 600. And coins aren't exactly quick to come by, so if you're looking for a challenge, you'll get one here. Speaking of the coins, they can be used to purchase accessories, new characters, and new stages as a way to extend replayability. Super Bomberman R certainly isn't the best looking game out there. While the cutscene style was endearing, the actual graphics tended to be pretty standard. The backgrounds are fine and the single-player level design played with certain elements, but there's never a wow factor to the game at all. In fact, the cutscenes made the actual graphics seem all the more dull. It made me wish they had gone for a full cel-shaded look. I don't think it takes away from the game though. The music is appropriately energetic with some really great songs, especially during the single player. I found myself often nodding along to them. However, many of these songs, especially the ones for the menus, have short loops, meaning they repeat over and over to near annoyance. I enjoyed them, but some wore out their welcome sooner than I'd like. The cutscenes are all fully voiced as well, with lines being said by the characters during matches. While some may not enjoy them, I personally liked how over the top a lot of them were. It made each one's personality stand out in the short time they were given. A bigger issue I had, at least initially, were the controls. The Bombermen have complete freedom of movement rather than being locked to the grid. This works in the mech boss fights, but there was a learning curve for the standard matches. I often found myself sticking out into the next row without realizing until I was promptly blown up. Fortunately, I eventually got used to this style, but it did throw me for a loop at first. Super Bomberman R is a welcome return to the Bomberman formula. While nothing it does is exactly new, it's still a great time with a group of friends, whether you're together in person or online. The campaign isn't exactly lengthy, but the multiple difficulties offer some replayability. I ended up liking it and recommend it to those of you searching for a good competitive game to play. There are issues, but I feel the sheer fun overrides most of them. Thanks for watching and be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on Bomberman, the Switch, and other things gaming.